Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and we have another incredible guest on. His name is Lee R. Phillips, and man, he's got a good story. I'm excited to hear all of the details of his story and how he got to where he is. He's a Supreme Court counselor, which basically means he can actually go and argue cases inside of the Supreme Court system, not just in the regular system. And so that's cool. But really, what we're excited about hearing is what created him. Like, what were the key experiences in his life and the questions that he asked himself that got him to where he is? And why is he so passionate about it now? And there's some experiences that happened when he was a young father that really was the catalyst for that. And I'm going to let him share those with you because obviously he knows more detail about them. But more importantly, I want you guys to be able to feel those experiences and think about, what are those experiences for me that would change the way I think and cause me to do something different than I ever thought I was going to do. So Lee, thank you so much for hopping on. I'm excited to hear, and
it's good to be with you. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, go for it. Go share with us kind of where you came from, a little bit of your story, and then we'll get into it.
Well, we could start when I was a baby and just bring it up, but
that's right. That's right.
I actually have a very sordid background. I have degrees in geology and physics and masters in nuclear chemistry, and then a doctorate in law, which makes you basically worthless. But, every family has one kid that goes bad. They become a lawyer. So I disappointed my family and got to be the lawyer. The
liar.
Liar. That's Texan for attorney, Sam. You all go down and see your liar. And by the way, Sam, you do know how to tell if a lawyer is lying, don't you?
If they're talking generally.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. That's the easy part. Here comes the hard part. Do you know what a good dead lawyer does? A good dead lawyer lies still.
Oh, there you go. Lies still. That's funny.
At any rate, I was a young father. I had 3 kids. My wife and I got married when we were 19 years old and had 3 children right away, which was a blessing to us because I was basically 26 when it started. And I showed up with final stage cancer. I was given 2 to 3 weeks to live when it was finally discovered by a cardiologist because I was having heart failure. And I became the national guinea pig. I went into the University of Utah. My treatments were run by the University of Indiana. Most cancer patients have 2-3 treating doctors. I had 53 treating doctors, and we received bills from an additional 250 plus doctors. And there were hundreds and hundreds more that actually set in or participated in the treatment. So I went into ICU, intensive care at the University of Utah on January 23rd, and I came out on July 4th. And I was still hospitalized, but I was out of the woods, shall we say. And after you've been that sick for that long, I didn't work for 3 more years. When I left the hospital, I weighed under 80 pounds. I was blind. I couldn't walk. It took a long time to recover. So after you've been that sick, you're unemployable. And I could get a job interview anytime, anywhere because of my background. But they say, well, what'd you do the first 3 years out of law school, guy? Oh, I did cancer research. Oh, well, you really don't want to be a lawyer then, huh? No, I'd like to be a lawyer. but nobody will ever hire you. I even at that time didn't have a 1-year life expectancy, so why bother? But I had to hang out my shingle and do my own work, and I learned the legal industry and learned that lawyers in many cases set people up for failure because they make more money out the back end. And so I started to write about it. I started to speak about it, and kind of became a national speaker is what I did. But I raised my family. We have 3 kids and actually 11 grandkids now. My wife of 46 years died 4 years ago of a disease called ALS. You know it as Lou Gehrig's. It's pretty much universally accepted as the worst diagnosis a human can receive. But I took care of her for 5 years. It was a great blessing. I could come to a full stop in my work and just take care of her. I had to have a nurse with me the last 3 years. If I was gone, we had to have 2 nurses. So she took care of me for 3 years when we were young, and I took care of her for 5 years when we were older. She got even with me. But we had an interesting life in the meantime. It wasn't at all the life that we expected. After I was sick, she decided she was going to go back to school. In the months that I was in the hospital, the social workers had continually quizzed her on, well, how are you going to support your family as a widow? Because they gave me less than a 2% chance of living. And we had the 3 little kids. So when the youngest went to school, Christy went back to school, and she ultimately graduated in English and history. And I pointed out that those are kind of 2 professions you don't get good jobs in most of the time. Okay. And so I talked her into going to law school. And so she went into law school and became a lawyer also. And then we worked together. So it worked quite well. But it wasn't the life we expected. I was going to be a scientist. And the reason I went to law school was so I could run my own chemistry company. And I never intended to be a lawyer. But I ended up practicing law and have made a difference in a lot of people's lives, and that's satisfying to me, because when I was sick, the legal system basically took us to the cleaners. We lost everything. And if my parents and her parents hadn't stepped in, we would have been homeless out on the street, literally. But I started to think about and study asset protection and how do you protect yourself. And the problem is, if I say asset protection, most people think lawsuit. But the fact of the matter is 56% of all bankruptcies in the United States are a result of somebody getting sick. So the question is, if I have a rental unit or if I have a little business, how do I protect that rental unit or that little business from somebody in the family getting sick? And there are ways to do that. You're going to use an LLC, I'll tell you that, but you can do it. The problem with this whole concept of asset protection is you have to do it now, because if you can see the disaster coming down the road, it's too late. And we have laws that say you can't start to transfer assets away from yourself once there's a problem. Everything freezes, and that's where they freeze you in on, and they can take the assets if you haven't protected them well in advance of that. For example, bankruptcy takes 5 years. We look back 5 years. Medicare looks back, or Medicaid looks back 5 years. So there are all of these look back laws, and if you've transferred assets in that 5-year period, they just go get them back. And so you've got to do this stuff well in advance. And I started to write about it, and I started to speak about it. So that's kind of what I think about, Sam, these days. And in fact, your biggest asset protection problem is the IRS guys. They're taking a big chunk of everything you make. And if I can save 10% 10 or 15 or 20% on my taxes, that's a big deal. Because, I mean, people don't understand. If you understood taxes, if you really understood what they were doing to you, we would revolt. We would go to war. In fact, we did go to war once over that with the Brits, as I remember.
Right.
But at any rate, that's kind of my background, Sam. And today I'm still working. I'm an old guy, but I said I was going to work till I was 78 because what else do you do? And I enjoy work. I like helping people understand these concepts because it makes a big difference in their lives.
Sure. Well, hey, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm going to start asking you lots of questions now. We'll see
okay.
how quick you are and think on your feet.
I'm sitting down, so it'll be easy.
Think on your butt. There you go. So when you say you were like the guinea pig of cancer research, what did that look like? I have actually had two family members, one currently there and one who was there. She passed away a year ago-ish. My little sister, she had chronic myeloid leukemia. And then my nephew, he has acute lymphoblastic leukemia, something like that.
Yeah, whatever, huh?
Yeah, so it's all these long words. But anyway, and they were both there at, I think he's now at Primary Children's, but they were both there in Utah at University of Health, Utah for a time.
Okay.
And so anyways, I know that Cancer Institute well, but I know it within the last 5 years, not.
I'm sorry you know it well. It actually wasn't the Huntsman Cancer Institute back then. It was just the University Hospital. I didn't have anything to lose because I was going to die anyway. So I became one of the first people in the United States to have multiple chemotherapies given all at the same time. If you have a cancer, we need to know exactly what type of cancer that is. And then someplace in the United States, there's a research group. I had a friend who was a doctor, and he found that research group. I had testicular cancer, I'll tell you that. It's the leading cause of cancer in males aged 20 to 40. It's a closet cancer. Nobody talks about it. And yet they should teach a male to check his testicle for lumps, just like they teach a female to check her breasts for lumps. But I was one of the first to have multiple chemotherapies given all at the same time. They had no idea how to dose it. If you're critical now, they'll give you what's called a bone marrow kill. They give you basically these same 6 chemotherapy agents that they gave me, and they give them to you in a large enough dose that it kills everything, including your bone marrow.
Right.
Well, I had a problem because they didn't understand they were going to kill all my bone marrow. Now they take your bone marrow, harvest it, and then give it back to you. They didn't do that. So I lost my bone marrow, which was a big problem. And they didn't know what to do back then. But they gave me the first dose at 10 times what they would dose it to you today as a critical patient. So I lapsed into a coma for 6 weeks. They killed me. Now, it was directed by the University of Indiana, and I started to say I had a friend who helped me find the research group that did research on that type of cancer. There's a group somewhere, and they do research on your cancer. You need to find that group. That group is 3 or 4 years ahead of the hospitals. And that group, if they'll help you, will guide the treatment and study you, but they're way advanced compared to the average guys at the hospital. Now, you don't need a doctor friend to get on his phone and start calling everybody saying the kid's got testicular cancer. Who does testicular cancer? Where do we go? Now it's easy. You can get it on the internet and you can see the groups that do the research in your specific type of cancer. And it helps if you can get in touch with them, have your oncologist locally, contact them and see if there's any new developments that they're working on over what the local oncologist already has in place. So cancer, there's almost a science to handling it. And one of the keys is finding the people who are advanced in studying the treatment of your type of cancer. And I'm sorry that your family has had that problem, Sam. It's a horrible problem, and it's sad because we lose a lot of people.
Yeah, it's fascinating. My sister, she tried a lot of different stuff. Because they tried to do like a bone marrow transplant or something. That was like one of the things that they were going to do.
Well, they were going to do this bone marrow kill,
right,
and then transplant bone marrow in her.
Right, and normally, I guess there would be a match for bone marrow that's a somewhat relative, or somewhere in some database there would be somebody who actually matches it. But there was nobody anywhere. Yeah, it was super, super crazy. The closest match was my brother, and it was only like 50 or 60% match. Like, it was not.
So she was a unique character, huh?
Yeah, she's a unique character in every aspect of her life. Not just that, but anyway, so it was just fascinating, the things that she went through, and as a result, our family went through dealing with that. But I am curious.
It's hard. Let me put in one point here. Yeah. And that is, if you get a diagnosis of cancer, your chance of a divorce is huge.
I'll talk about that too with her.
Because the surviving spouse, they can't deal with the stress of it. Christy got to the point where she couldn't drive herself. She was that focused, that upset that she couldn't drive.
Yeah. So my sister, she was in the military, or in ROTC there at UVU in Utah, and got diagnosed. And within 6 months or so, got divorced from her first husband, who she'd only been married to for about 6 months. So short marriage. Anyway, so then about a year later, she got married again. She got remarried. That husband, knowing that she had cancer and knowing everything, right? Knowing everything about something, and then actually having the weight and the responsibility of that something that you know are two different things. And so that marriage only lasted about 6 or 7 months as well, just because hard. So it's an interesting thing. So, and that kind of brings me to my question of how do you, because I know as well, and like you mentioned, bankruptcy, the leading cause of bankruptcy is medical debt or medical issues in family that lead to multiple things, not just medical debt, but it might lead to loss of job or loss of income, which then leads to over excessive debt, which then leads to bankruptcy, even if the medical debt was paid for by the insurance company. Companies don't cover cost of living, they cover cost of care. So it's very different.
I didn't work for 3 years. Our family had nothing.
Yeah. So how do you structure this thing about 5 years? I knew that you have like different chapters of bankruptcy, and that can last different times as far as the recovery period from an economic standpoint. But so the 5-year rule, explain that as far as what happens going back 5 years in a bankruptcy.
Well, if people start to get in trouble, they'll transfer the house to the kids, or they'll transfer the stock to the kids, or to the wife, or to somebody else. And the bankruptcy courts go back for 5 years and look at these transfers. And if there's been a transfer for less than fair market value, I can sell my house, but I get the money from the house. So that's still mine. But if I'm trying to give stuff away and get money out, hide it, basically, the laws say, no, you can't do that. In fact, we can go back 5 years.
So let's just play devil's advocate here, because I don't know the rules or the laws. So let's say we sell our house to somebody, but we sell or finance our house rather than actually.
That's fine, but those payments are coming in, and the bankruptcy trustee can
then say we get
seize those payments. You didn't do that in order to screw your creditors that you're trying to get rid of in your
Sure.
And I'm not a bankruptcy guy either, so don't pin me down.
No. I don't think so. I'm just trying to understand the rule because I never knew that.
Well, the concept is you can't screw your creditors.
Sure.
And if I know I'm having problems, I'll try and get assets away from me. And that's where you get into trouble.
So there are certain types of life insurance that I've heard if you were to put money into them, then in most states, not all states, then they would be non-litigatable and you wouldn't be able to take that in certain cash value policies. How does that play into the bankruptcy regulation?
Each state has specific laws that protect some assets. For example, federally, an IRA is protected in bankruptcy. That's the Rossi case. But each state has laws that say if you get sued, not in bankruptcy, but you just get sued, they can't come and get your IRA, or they can only take so much of your IRA, or they can't come and get your life insurance, or they can only take so much of your life insurance. So each state has these laws, and it depends upon which state you're in. Actually, California is one of the worst states. They don't really protect your IRA. If you get sued, you're going to lose your IRA. Some states protect it 100%. You get sued, you ain't losing your IRA. So it depends upon state law to a great degree, but you have assets, you have a house. And in certain states, you get what we call a homestead exemption. And in Florida and Texas, that's 100%. I can have a $12 million house in Florida, and if I declare bankruptcy or somebody sues me, they can't get that house. Now, in Florida, I'm going to pay basically an extra point on my mortgage because even the mortgage company has a problem getting a house. So it depends upon which state. I think in Utah, you get like the first 60,000. They can't take that away from you. Whoopee. Yeah. I don't know what it is in Arizona where you are, Sam, but each state has these laws, and we've got insurance. Now, 401ks, retirement plans that are under ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, they're protected. So the judge can't get your 401k. They can't take away your HSA, your health savings account, or your HRA, or your cafeteria plan. These are ERISA plans, either retirement or benefit. And the fact is, they're protected by federal law. The states go a little further and protect IRAs. Now, IRAs aren't part of ERISA. So that's going to be a state law. The states protect the insurance or the 401ks, or to some degree, the houses. The two big ones are Florida and Texas. Like I said, they're 100%. So there are these laws that allow us to, I'm going to say, protect assets to some degree in states. And I was given a seminar a while back, and this 50-something-year-old guy started to cry. I'm going, uh-oh, what did I do? But I was talking about these types of things. It was back in the 2008-9, and he had 5 pieces of property down in Las Vegas. He'd paid $800,000 for these properties. They were now worth $150,000. He can't pay the mortgage. He can't rent them for enough. He's got to declare bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy attorney said, "You're going to lose everything. You're toast, buddy." He had another 2 houses that were pretty good. He had some savings. He had his own house. And the short story is we used these tools. For example, Nevada law says, I think it's 50,000. I can put 50,000, maybe it's 25,000 a year into an insurance policy, and the bankruptcy courts can't touch it, even though I've been doing it within this 5-year period. So we
is it an average of 25, or is it?
That's up to 25.
Up to 25 every year. So, like, let's say I find out I have to file bankruptcy, I could move $125,000 all in, and that counts for 25 each year, or is it?
Well, we immediately set up a life insurance policy for him and his wife. That's 2, right?
Sure.
So 25 here, 25 there, and I forget the numbers. Okay.
Okay.
But we got that out in November, and then we did it again in January. So we got $100,000 out, and we protected that in the life insurance. The short story is the guy lost all of his real estate that was bad, and we protected all but about $50,000 of his other assets, which is very different than them saying he's going to lose $1.5 million in the other assets.
Right. Well, and this, I don't know all the details because I haven't had to go through it, but it's interesting because I've read books by, we'll call them influential people. Some of them used to be presidents. But okay. Yeah, exactly. Right. But that's kind of a business model of some people, is to go and acquire businesses, move all the assets out of the business, leave all the debt, and bankrupt the business, and just take the assets with them. Like, that has happened. That does happen.
And I'm going to say, I don't know all the details. I've never done that, but they do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's an ethical thing. Like, is it the right thing to do? Maybe not, but sometimes for whatever reason, business doesn't have
some rich guys make a whole living out of doing that.
Exactly.
They get a business, they chop it up, sell it off, and bankrupt it.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened to one of my family members.
Yeah, it's an
exact same thing.
Fascinating.
And they had sold the business on an installment plan, so much each year. Well, after 2 years, they destroyed the business. They bankrupted it, and the family member who was getting the payments, they're out too.
Yeah.
So they're one of the creditors.
So what's a situation, or how would somebody protect against that? Obviously, I think that having expert counsel is valuable.
Yeah, you need that sort of expert counsel. And I don't know that a lot of your listeners are going to be getting into that situation, Sam.
You're probably right about the business. They're not going to be getting into it per se, but there are a lot of small business owners out there who maybe are looking to sell their company. And there's a lot of other people who say, just sell or finance it. We'll buy it or we'll pay it over time because you don't want the tax liability of getting a big paycheck. I mean, I've seen it all.
Yeah. It all happens. And that's unique to you, and who's buying it and how much do I trust them and all of that sort of stuff. One of the big problems with a small business owner is when the guy dies. And statistically, 95% of the small businesses fail within 5 years of the owner dying. When the owner dies, the founder dies, that business has got little chance of moving on, boys. One of the problems is the business gets caught in the probate process. We can remove the business from the probate process by having not you, but your living trust own that business. Then we keep it out of the probate process, and at least it can go on without the legal burden and the court interference and all of that stuff that you get in the probate process. So estate planning is an important aspect of everybody's life, really, because unfortunately, the lawyers take advantage of people when somebody in the family dies. It's Christy and I went down and had a hot date, and we went down and picked out coffins and all of that sort of garbage. We knew Christy was going to die. ALS is 100% fatal. You have a 0% chance. Right. But it was nice because we prepaid it and we got it for about 2/3 of what you walk in off the street and pay it for. But the other thing that was nice is there wasn't the upsale after. Oh, you really loved your wife, don't you? You should really get the better coffin, not this coffin. Well, the same thing happens with lawyers. And when there's a problem, then they can get in and they can make their money, basically with the upsell. You've got to do this. We got to do that. We got to do all of this stuff. Well, if it's in a living trust, I don't have to ask the questions about probate. No lawyer's going to take advantage of me because I have gotten that out. It's gone. It's not going to be subject to any lawyer interference. and the people I leave behind, they can manage the business. And it's got a much better chance of making it through this death of the founder.
Yeah, and that's something that just I was unaware of because I got put in charge of everything with my sister. We did get a trust put together kind of on her deathbed. It was like 2 months before.
Well, did you fund the trust? Did it own her bank account and own the piece of property?
Some of it. It didn't own everything. She didn't really have any property, but the trust. What was really helpful about the trust at the end of the day, because we didn't get everything funded properly in time. There just wasn't enough time to do everything. But what was helpful is that she had specifically outlined, not just in a will perspective, but in a trust perspective, who was in charge of things. And that was helpful because something I didn't fully understand going into it was that a power of attorney is really only valuable as long as somebody's alive. Once they're dead,
it's gone the instant the guy dies.
Yeah. So a power of attorney, although I thought it was like, oh, this is good, we can take care of stuff and get everything moved over. No, as soon as she was dead, it was like, you better have more and it took so much. It would have taken so much more documentation. But then anytime anybody asked, they're like, who says you are who you say you are? I was like, well, here's the trust. Here's her birth certificate, my birth certificate. It was very easy with the trust documents to get all of that sorted out with everybody who needed it.
Well, you need to, what we say, fund the trust, and you've used that term, but the trust has to own the little business. It has to own the piece of property, the bank account. It has to be funded with all of the assets that require the individual's signature. Because when the individual's dead, nobody can sign their signature. The whole probate process is to go through court and get the court to appoint somebody and give them power to actually sign that guy's name.
Yeah.
So the trust is a neat trick. And the trick of the trust is we've moved the assets into this trust. You can think of it as a little company, and it's heresy for me to say that. Mm-hmm. But you can think of it as a little company. We move the assets into the trust. Then when the individual dies, the owner of the assets didn't die. The manager of the assets died. And the trust document appoints another manager, another trustee. And so this individual instantly has authority over all those assets. So there isn't any probate. It's a trick. We went out and around this probate process.
Right.
But it's kind of a cool trick, guys.
So does that, so in Medicaid and bankruptcy, that has to be done 5 years prior. It didn't seem to have to be done 5 years prior.
Actually, the trust, the living revocable trust that we're talking about, that isn't going to protect any assets from bankruptcy or Medicaid or anything else. It just avoids probate. That's all it does.
Okay, so if you were a trustee on a trust and you went through a bankruptcy, then they could still take it.
They can get all of those assets.
Just because you're a trustee of it?
No. If I'm a trustee, they can't get the trust assets. If I'm the guy that put the assets into the trust, they can get them back from the trust.
Okay.
Usually I'm the guy who puts them in, and I'm the trustee. So it's my property. As long as I'm alive, basically it's my property. Technically, the trust owns it, but I manage it. If my creditors sue me, they can get it. I don't get a new tax ID number. It's just my social security number on all of the accounts, even though the trust owns them.
Okay. That's.
But a trust is a great tool that people need to learn how to use.
Sure. And you're an expert in it. I'm not. We're not here to talk about anybody's specific situation. So if that's something.
I'm actually pretty well known as in the trust world. I have a 14 pages ebook on how to use a trust. If you want your people, I'll give it to them. That'd be helpful. Where would they go? Just ask for it. We have set up a link. It's actually a different link, but we'll use this link anyway. It's your Knickerbocker Bacher. It's legalese, LEGALEES.com. That's my name, pun on my name, legal, LEGAL, and then EES.com/Knickerbocker. Okay.
Okay. Perfect.
And now I'll just give them the How to Use a Trust ebook.
Okay. So that would be helpful for them. So let's talk about, the next, just because I'm curious, and this has happened so often in life, I think, where we think we're going to end up doing, like we're going towards one thing and we end up doing something completely different. So you'd mentioned that you wanted to run a chemical research type business.
Yep. I had one.
So you had one, and then how did law fit into that? Did you just want to know how to protect yourself, and that's why you went to law?
How to run the business. I wanted to be the CEO, and I needed to understand the business aspects of running the business. So basically, I went to law school to learn how to run the business.
That's an unconventional way to go learn how to run a business. Why not go to MBA school or something? I'm just curious.
You could have gone to MBA school, but I went to law school.
So, and you went specific. Is there a way to specialize specifically in business law, or
not really? But you learn about the contracts that the company's signing. You learn about the liabilities of being the president. You learn about all of this stuff, and it just gives you the ability to see it from a business standpoint instead of just from a scientific standpoint.
So how do you feel like that knowledge ultimately helped you in business ownership, or helped you better serve your clients who are business owners?
Well, it's helped me do this asset protection stuff for small business owners, and that's what I've done over my legal career. I don't take clients anymore, but I do teach people how to do this stuff. And it's really important, if you're going to start a little business, to understand how to protect you from what happens in the business. But just as important is how to protect the assets in the business. And that could be a piece of real estate, a rental piece of real estate, for example, to protect the assets in the business from what happens to the owner. So if I get sick, is my rental unit at risk or is it not? And I can make it so it's not. And that's pretty cool, guys.
So when, let's say somebody is a business owner, at what stage in their business, and I'm using business owner here just so I can clarify very loosely, right? In my mind, if I'm using it strictly, a business owner is somebody who can walk away from their business and it runs without them. That's what I think an actual business owner. There's a lot of
a business owner to me is a guy who puts in sweat and tears every day and makes it work.
Okay. And that's why I wanted to clarify, right? Because I would consider that somebody self-employed, which is fine. I understand that there's still value for somebody like that who's self-employed. But if they died, a lot of times if they died, their business doesn't exist without them. So that's what I said. Yeah.
And part of the problem is it gets caught in probate. Another part of the problem is that we don't really have, I call them a gyroscope. The founder is the gyroscope. It's spinning and keeping this business in balance. Mm-hmm. And once that gyroscope is gone, the business just spins out of control.
Well, and oftentimes, if you're self-employed and you're the lawn mowing company, and I say lawn mowing company, but you've got one lawnmower and you cut the grass yourself. When you die, there's no one else that's going to take over. It's not really a business. Obviously you run it from a tax perspective as a business for many benefits, but it had no chance of success.
It has no chance of success. That is correct. Yeah. It's not going to survive the owner's death, but he does need to run it as a business, because as a little business, he can control his taxes. Your little business and your real estate investments are your two tax shelters. The problem is the accountant never brings you in, puts his arm around you and says, we need to really teach you how to use your little business, your real estate investments as a tax shelter. They never do that. And yet somehow people who own businesses, people who invest in real estate, they get ahead wealth-wise. What they don't even understand is a big percentage of that getting ahead health-wise or wealth-wise is because of the tax treatment, the tax advantages of the little business and the real estate investing.
Right. No, I completely agree. So at what stage in somebody's little business would they start the legal process of a trust if that was something that would make sense for them? Like, is there a dollar amount when it makes sense? Is there a certain amount of assets?
No. There's not a dollar amount that makes sense. Basically, if you have any assets of any significance, mom could have a bank account and I'm not going to worry about her. But if you own a piece of real estate, if you own a little business, if you own some investment property, if you have kids, you need the trust. I'm just going to tell you that. I'm not even going to mince words with it.
Awesome. Well, I actually agree with you, but
and the lawyers will say, oh, you don't need a trust. You don't have enough to worry about. They're setting you up for failure because if you don't do the trust, when you die, everything goes into probate and they're going to take a much higher percentage of your wealth in that probate process than they do for a rich person. The rich person may pay more, but it isn't a double-digit percentage of their wealth, which you can lose in this probate process if you're, I'm going to say, a normal, not so rich guy.
Right. Yeah, that's the key thing there. And a lot of people have, I talk to people about it and say, hey, have you got that? Have you thought about getting those? And a lot of people will put off getting wills and trusts, custody agreements, medical directives. They'll put off getting these documentations. One, because they just don't even know that they're supposed to. So that's one area of just information. But a lot of people will put it off because they think it's going to cost them an arm and a leg because they hear a lawyer and they think the lawyer is going to try and screw them for everything they're worth. And I think what you've talked about so far is if you're going in to meet with the lawyer before there's a problem, that's very different than meeting with a lawyer after there's a crisis and now you're trying to
clean up. That's true. I mean, that's what I've done in my life is make kits for people to do their own LLCs and their own trusts and their own all of this stuff. You can do it. I'm convinced you can do it better than 80% of the lawyers in your city. And you can do it faster and a ton cheaper. But the reason people don't do this stuff, the reason they don't set up an LLC, or the reason they don't do a trust, they don't understand it. If you understand something, you're not afraid of it. If you don't understand it, you're afraid of it. I mean, the first time I bought a stock, I remember it. I was in college. I was a young guy, and I was scared to death. I called up the broker guy and said, I want to buy a stock. And I was, whoa. After you've done it 10 times, no big deal.
Right. Yeah.
Once you understand it, it's no big deal.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. So that's just something that people need to get used to. So not only can you have at this legal ease. I like it. I like the play on your name. Legalease.com/Knickerbocker. They'll get a smaller, like a pamphlet basically of.
They're going to get 14 pages on how to use a trust.
How to use it.
If you've already got a trust, it'll help you use it. And part of the problem is people go down, they pay the big bucks to the lawyer, they get the pieces of paper, and the lawyer actually almost intentionally doesn't teach them how to use the trust because the trust has to, as you said, has to be funded. That means it has to own the assets. And you've got to do that legwork. You've got to do it all through your life. And if you don't understand that, then you pay the big bucks for the trust up front, and the lawyer still gets all of the probate. So the large percentage, the vast majority of these trusts fail because the lawyer doesn't teach the client how to use the trust.
And how to operate it.
How to use it. And that's what I'm trying to do with this how to use a trust.
Right. And so then do you also give out, you said like kits and things. if somebody did want to not just learn how to use the trust, but how to organize the trust or get a trust started LLC, are those all going to be on that same link, or are they be?
They're not going to be on that same link. No, they'll have to look me up otherwise.
Okay, no, that's fine. So is Google just the best place to look you up?
I guess Google works, I guess. Yes.
Google works.
I have a bigger book out on trusts. It's called Protecting Your Financial Future. You can get it from Amazon and those kind of guys. Protecting Your Financial Future, it's like $25, but it's been a Time Warner Book of the Month Club book. There are two big book clubs. There's Time Warner and there's Oprah. And this has been a Time Warner Book of the Month Club book, which means Time Warner says little old ladies ought to read it in their book clubs. So it's a very readable book, and yet it carries the Certified Financial Planners logo, and you can't find another book that carries that logo. You can't do it. The CFPs get 11 hours of continuing education credit for reading the book and answering the test that I give them. But it's good enough that the certified financial planners need to read it, and yet it's readable enough that Time Warner says little old ladies ought to read it in their book club.
Interesting. Well, I'll have to go read it too, because I always need more information and more ways to explain it to people who can benefit from it. Because I just know that I was very grateful that I knew enough lawyers who were helpful at explaining why I needed it for my sister, and thus myself, and now my other siblings. I've said, hey, look, we got to get this done.
Yeah, you got to get it done.
And that what was fascinating, there's so much we could keep talking about. Yeah,
we can go on this forever.
When death happens, death is just the most interesting thing. And depending on how and when somebody dies, yes, the governments, the IRS, all those people, they want to fight over your assets. But what I found very helpful inside of a trust and a will was not the financial stuff. That's not what sometimes families fight over the financial stuff, but oftentimes it's the things that are more sentimental, that there's more.
Absolutely. I call them the dollies and the doilies.
Yeah.
And in this book, I think even in the How to Use a Trust, I talk about how to get rid of the dollies and doilies, because you're right. That's the family fight.
Yeah. And it's so sad. I've seen it happen to so many of my clients where everything was going fine, and then it came to the stuff that has no monetary value. So there's like,
I've seen it. I've seen the fight over dad's college ring. I've seen the fight over the Parcheesi board that the family played every week together when the kids were growing up. And so you're right. It's these little things, the gun collection, mom's tatting. It's these little things that are the family fights. I always say, if I can buy it at Walmart, I don't care about it. There isn't going to be a fight.
Well, that's how some people feel, but then other people will, burn it so that nobody else can have it, even if they can't have it. Anyways, it's like the Solomon splitting the baby in two, and you're just like, okay, come on now. Like
the greed of a child raises to its height at the death of their parent.
Yeah. So anyways, I just think that I'm grateful for this conversation. I'm grateful you came on, because it's a needed conversation everybody needs to have, everybody needs to hear and think about. And in my opinion, everybody needs to take action on some aspect of it. And if that action is just learning, then go learn. Like, don't put your head in the sand, go learn, and then decide how you want to move forward.
Sam, I can make your listeners a guarantee. You do what we're talking about today, I'll guarantee you it's worth every effort you make, every dime that you spend, just in the peace of mind. It's worth it for no other reason alone than that. It's worth it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, hey, thank you so much. And we'll catch you guys next time on Fuel Your Legacy Show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.